Welcome back to the illumilands. My name is Daniel Hurd, and I've been reading a lot from a guy named Friedrich Nietzsche. I have here this book of his called The Antichrist, a criticism of Christianity. And this is hands down one of the most unique books I have ever read from any philosopher ever. In this video, I'm going to start going over Nietzsche's actual critique of Christianity in The Antichrist with some supplemental material from more Nietzsche. I've got Beyond Good and Evil. I don't actually know how to pronounce this one. I think it's Ecce Homo. Might be Ecce Homo. Then his very last one, The Gay Science, which is basically Nietzsche writing poetry. The number one thing to know before going into The Antichrist and Ecce Homo is that both of those works were written approximately half a year before Nietzsche went clinically insane. It's believed that he had some kind of syphilis that just really affected his brain. He just dropped in the street one day, and he was never able to think straight from then on. So this is like less than a year away from Nietzsche's mental collapse. Nietzsche is known for his seemingly radical views on morality. According to Nietzsche, ever since Christianity took over culturally in the West, basically morality has been flipped on its head, so that what was once revered as good and noble is now exactly what the Christians call morally bad, and vice versa. The things that Christians call good, according to Nietzsche, are actually vices. They make us weaker. So I'm going to move on to the first and what might actually be the single most provocative thing in this whole book. On the very second page, Nietzsche says, "What is good? All that enhances the feeling of power, the will to power, and power itself in man. What is bad? All that proceeds from weakness. What is happiness? The feeling that power is increasing, that resistance has been overcome. Not contentment, but more power. Not peace at any price, but war. Not virtue, but efficiency. The weak and botched shall perish. First principle of our humanity, and they ought even to be helped to perish." What is more harmful than any vice? Practical sympathy with all the botched and the weak Christianity. That's quite the start. Nietzsche's ethic seems very radical and uncompromising and ruthless. My first reaction to reading this was, how in the world does he think Christianity is weak and botched, and so much so that sympathizing with it is the worst vice? According to Nietzsche, Christianity has waged a deadly war upon the higher type of man. It has set a ban upon all the fundamental instincts of this type and has distilled evil and the devil himself out of these instincts. The strong man as the typical pariah, the villain. Christianity has sided with everything weak, low, and botched. It has made an ideal out of antagonism towards all the self-preservative instincts of strong life. It has corrupted even the reason of the strongest intellects by teaching that the highest values of intellectuality are sinful, misleading, and full of temptations. According to Nietzsche, Christianity suppresses the instincts that make humans strong. For example, loving your enemy, giving people even more than they ask for, turning the other cheek. As for intellect, he's referring primarily to faith, the assurance of things unseen. And it's really that unseen part that gets him. We are somehow absolutely certain of something we can't even see or directly perceive. Christianity, quote, continually prohibits the expression of the passions as something to be left to the vulgar, to coarser, bourgeois, and peasant natures. As for the vulgar, think of sex and sexual modesty. Think of the last 30 to 40 years when fundamentalist Christians were adamant about so-called purity culture. Abstinence until marriage. Nothing but abstinence until marriage. And by marriage, we mean legal marriage. You know, it's not enough for a couple just to make a commitment to each other. No, that's not enough. They need to be part of a legally binding contract. And if they're not, then any sex is immoral. This thinking is just too arbitrarily rigid. As an example of pretty Christian weakness, he writes in The Gay Science, he has this poem called The Polite Man. And it's just this. It says, he is so polite. Yes, he always has a sop for Cerberus with him, and is so timid that he takes everybody for Cerberus, even you and me. That is his politeness. It's a kind of deceit where you're polite, but not because you recognize the other person as a fellow human being. No, it's because you view them as monsters to be appeased and avoided. Think how fundamentalists talk about, quote unquote, the world. The world is just a phrase for everyone and everything that is not Christian. There's a culture in fundamentalism that says, well, you can associate with them, that is, people in the world, you can associate with them, like you can talk to them, but be on your guard when they do or say anything that seems unchristian. But why would people act like this? What, in social situations, you're just constantly going to be on your guard? Unchristian, unchristian. Again, why would people act like this? One answer, which Nietzsche seems to give, is that they feel, quote, commanded to do so, and expect to get a beating when their gracious master is not satisfied with the result. It's the threat of hell, the threat of separation from God. People, I think, do have a kind of command drilled into them that's like, be on your guard, because there's an enemy out there and he hates you, and people all around you in the world they just don't see. They don't see the evil. They participate in it, but they don't recognize how they're engaged in this evil. Going back to the Antichrist, Nietzsche says Christianity is called the religion of pity. Ugh. Pity is opposed to the passions, which enhance the energy and the feeling of life. Its action is depressing. That is, pity's action is depressing. A man loses his power when he pities. By means of pity, the drain on strength, which suffering itself already introduces into the world, is multiplied 1,000-fold. Through pity, suffering itself becomes infectious. In certain circumstances, it may lead to a total loss of life and vital energy, which is absurdly out of proportion to the magnitude of the cause. People have dared to call pity a virtue. People went still further. They exalted it to the virtue, the root and origin of all virtues. Schopenhauer was right in this respect. By means of pity, life is denied and made more worthy of denial. Pity is the praxis or the assumption or outcome of nihilism. I repeat, this depressing and infectious instinct thwarts those instincts which aim at the preservation and enhancement of life by multiplying misery quite as much as by preserving all that is miserable. Nothing is more unhealthy in the midst of our unhealthy modernity than Christian pity. This might come as a shock to you, but some of what Nietzsche is saying here is actually pretty in line with Christianity itself. Yes, I know that might sound like the exact opposite of what I've just read, but remember what Jesus said about worrying. Which of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? The point is, worrying does nothing to solve whatever it is you're worried about. It just makes you feel worse. Similarly, Nietzsche is saying you're not helping anything by just pitying other people. You look across at someone who's smoking or swearing or engaged in something you take to be immoral, and you're like, man, that's so unfortunate for them. Geez. Like, what good is feeling that emotion doing you? What good is it doing the person? It seemingly is doing nothing. We can even use Jesus' wording to make Nietzsche's point. Which of you, by pitying, can remove a single ounce of misery? I mean, that's pretty much it. How does pitying help you? And yet, according to Nietzsche, this is one of the most common things that Christians do. They pity virtually all non-Christians, also specifically for being non-Christian. Unfortunately, they're going to hell. But Nietzsche's point still stands. You're not doing anything by pitying. It's not like you're helping these people become saved by pitying them. Now, there's another side that's not fundamentalist Christianity, but that I think nowadays we would refer to more as liberal Christians who focus less on spiritual salvation and more on just general love, kindness, camaraderie with others. They still have the same problem with pity. It's doing nothing. You know, pity is not making the world more loving. It's not making it kinder. It's not improving conditions. What's it doing? Now, if feeling pity for someone else helps you or inspires you to do something helpful, that's great. But so much of fundamentalist and liberal Christianity involves nothing more than working yourself into a state of pity towards others. Eventually, You come out of this state of pity having done nothing to address whatever you were pitying. What is the actual effect of almost all Christian pity, especially according to Nietzsche? Nothing but a short period of time where you voluntarily make yourself feel worse. Now, there's a darker side to pity that Nietzsche doesn't even touch, but that I would like to touch on. Ask yourself again, why would you pity someone if the only effects of this pity were negative? I mean, it seems like you would have no incentive to pity if it's really, truly not doing anything. It makes you feel worse and it doesn't help anyone. But what if it didn't make you feel worse? What if, on a more nefarious level, pity actually made you feel better about yourself? Think of the following phrase. Well, at least I'm not... insert thing here. Does it make sense now? You can think, well, I mean, I know I've got my problems, but at least I'm not as bad as that. At least I am better than that person in that respect. It's just a nefarious game of trying to compare yourself to others and bump yourself up on some moral hierarchy. Nietzsche goes on to state exactly who the Antichrist is aimed at. It is necessary, quote, to state whom we regard as our antithesis. The theologians and all those who have the blood of theologians in their veins. This can really be misunderstood, so let's get clear on Nietzsche's point. In Ecce Homo, he says, I attack only causes that are victorious. I never attack persons. I attack only things where any kind of personal difference is excluded, where there is no background of bad experience. If I wage a war on Christianity, I have a right to do so, because I've never experienced anything disagreeable or frustrating from that direction. The most serious Christians have always been well disposed towards me. I, myself, an opponent of Christianity de rigueur, which, that's Latin, I believe it means in practice. I could be wrong on that. It also could be rigorous, unsure. I, myself, an opponent of Christianity, am far from bearing a grudge against the individual for what is the fatality of millennia. So when he criticizes theologians in the Antichrist, he's more so criticizing the things common to most theologians, the common mindset of theologians. This quote from Ecce Homo is like Nietzsche's version of hate the sin, love the sinner. He's saying, look, my critiques are aimed at ideas, not people, okay? Just because I criticize Christianity and its historical progression, that doesn't mean I'm bad-mouthing actual Christians or people I know who are Christians. Now, that's good as a statement, but admittedly, it's about as good as hate the sin, love the sinner. In both cases, separating between people and ideas gets murky. How would you feel if you were fully convinced of something and another person came up to you and said, I just think that view is absolutely ridiculous. I'm not calling you ridiculous. I just think that view that you hold with certainty is absolutely ridiculous. Okay. Well, it's not hard to put two and two together and think, okay, if I believe this wholeheartedly, he thinks this is really stupid. That means that he believes I'm the kind of person who can believe really stupid things. And I mean, that seems kind of like a personal attack. At least Nietzsche knows it's not his goal to attack people. But again, there are cases in all of his works where he is attacking an idea, but he's attacking it so ferociously and so adamantly that it's almost like if you believe the thing he's going against, that's ridiculous. Continuing where we left off in The Antichrist, Nietzsche says, "It is necessary to state whom we regard as our antithesis, the theologians and all those who have the blood of theologians in their veins. A man must have had his very nose upon this fatality, or better still, he must have experienced it in his own soul. He must almost have perished through it in order to be unable to treat this matter lightly." He then makes a little side comment. He says, "The free-spiritedness of our friends, the naturalists and physiologists, is, in my opinion, a joke. What they lack in these questions is passion. What they lack is having suffered from these questions." Whew. Speaking personally, when I first read this, I was pretty touched by it because he seems to go through a very similar mental process that I went through, which is that you're steeped in what I would call hardcore fundamentalist Christianity. Your entire life, you know nothing different from it. And eventually you get to the age where you look at it and you see some things that are a little questionable. And the questionable things turn into like, whoa, man, my upbringing really shaped my thinking quite a lot. I love this, though, that he must almost have perished through it in order to be unable to treat this matter lightly. That's kind of how I feel. Not just that you don't take the matter lightly, it's that you really couldn't take it lightly, even if you tried. And frankly, I think that's largely the result of growing up and knowing nothing else and being told that this one thing that you're surrounded with is like the all-time ultimate important thing. Reading this for the first time was just the first time I read a statement that so closely aligns with my experience. But as heartwarming as it sort of is to me, Nietzsche's statement here does seem to go against what he said in Ecce Homo, that he only attacks things where any kind of personal difference is excluded, where there is no background of bad experience. In The Antichrist, he seems to affirm the opposite here, that someone can be intellectually hardened in a good way by suffering through questions and feeling their importance. He even points to naturalists as not taking religious matters seriously enough. I think, however, we can solve this seeming contradiction by interpreting bad experience, what Nietzsche talks about, as bad experience with a person or of a person. So he's not saying you must be emotionally detached from the subject. Instead, he's saying, look, I don't argue with someone when my relationship with that person has been strained, when we've had differences of personality. That way, there's no possibility that ideas are infected with bias against the one who disagrees with you. Nietzsche continues talking about the poison of this type of person he calls the theologian. But I'm going to leave this video off here and continue that in the next video. So, thank you very much for watching. I really hope that you enjoy this kind of new standing style of doing videos. It definitely makes me feel more free to move, even if just a little bit. So, hope you like it. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, click the like button because that helps the YouTube algorithm. If you really like the video, you can subscribe and share it with someone you know. And if you really, really like what I do, you can go over to Patreon and consider making a one-time donation or becoming a patron. And there are some kind of cool perks to becoming a patron, just saying. I also have it set up now so that if you want to donate through PayPal instead of Patreon, if that's easier, you can now do that. So, thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.